Today, we're going to tune into a technology that might seem, a little old school, but it's actually the grandparent of your Wi-Fi, your 5G, pretty much all wireless communication. I'm talking about AM radio. The principles behind it are just fascinating, so let's dive in and see how this whole thing actually works. It's a really good question, right? I mean, you can shout, but your voice doesn't travel for miles and miles. So why can't a radio station just crank up the volume on a voice and blast it out there? Well, it turns out there are some pretty big, and I mean literally big, physical roadblocks in the way. And that brings us to our first major hurdle. See, to broadcast any signal effectively, you need an antenna. But when you're dealing with low-frequency signals like, say, the human voice, this becomes a giant problem. Yeah, the physics here just creates a trifecta of issues. First off, audio frequencies have these super long wavelengths, and for an antenna to work well, it has to be a decent chunk of that wavelength. We're talking about antennas that would need to be miles long, just totally impractical. Second, even if you could build one, these things are awful at radiating power. The signal would just fizzle out almost immediately. And finally, imagine if multiple stations tried to do this. Their signals would all just mush together into one big, jumbled, noisy mess. So, broadcasting sound directly. It's a non-starter. The solution, though, was absolutely ingenious. Instead of trying to send that weak, low-frequency message by itself, engineers figured out a way for it to hitch a ride on something way more powerful. And that solution is a little thing called modulation. This is really the heart of it all. What we do is take our information, the sound we want to send, and we use it to change or modulate a completely separate high-frequency wave. We call that the carrier wave. And this carrier wave is perfectly suited for traveling long distances. The easiest way to picture this is with an analogy. Think of your message, your voice, as a person who needs to go a really long way. On their own, they can't get very far, right? Now, think of the high-frequency carrier wave as a supersonic jet. By putting the message on that vehicle, it can travel hundreds, even thousands of miles, super fast and super efficiently. Modulation is just the process of getting that passenger onto the jet. So how exactly do we get the passenger onto the jet? Well, this is where amplitude modulation, or AM, gets its name. It's all about shaping that carrier wave in a very specific way by combining two signals. Okay, first up, you've got your message signal. This is your information, right? The original sound wave from the studio. A voice, some music, whatever. This is the low-frequency passenger that needs to take a trip. Next, you have the carrier wave. This is our vehicle. It's just a pure high-frequency sine wave. And notice, its amplitude, its height or its strength, is perfectly constant. It has zero information on its own. It's basically just a blank slate, ready and waiting to be shaped. And now for the magic. When we combine them using amplitude modulation, the carrier wave's super high frequency stays exactly the same, but its amplitude, its strength, is now forced to change. It gets stronger and weaker, perfectly tracing the shape of our original message. So the information is now encoded in the height of that powerful carrier wave. Pretty clever, huh? And if you were to trace an imaginary line along the peaks of this new AM wave, you get what we call the envelope. And look at that. The envelope is a perfect copy of our original message signal. This is the key. A simple little radio receiver just has to detect this envelope shape to recreate the original sound. But of course, there's a catch. To get a clean, strong signal, you can't just mash these two waves together and hope for the best. Nope, you have to get the balance just right. And this is absolutely crucial for clear broadcasting. So how do we measure this delicate balance? Well, we use something called the modulation index. It's basically just the ratio of the message's strength to the carrier's strength. It tells us how deeply and how clearly that message is being stamped onto its vehicle. So what happens if this ratio is off? Well, if the message signal is too weak compared to the carrier, that gives you an index less than 1, you get under-modulation. The whole process is really inefficient, and the final broadcast signal is just going to be faint and weak. But if the message is too strong, an index greater than 1, you get over-modulation, and that's even worse. The carrier gets totally overwhelmed, which causes the signal to distort horribly and even bleed over into other radio channels, creating a ton of interference. The sweet spot, the absolute bullseye that every AM engineer is aiming for, is a modulation index of exactly 1, or, 100%. This is perfect modulation. Here, the carrier's amplitude varies from its maximum all the way down to 0, but it never goes below it. This is what creates the strongest, clearest, and most efficient signal you can possibly get. Now, this brings us to a question that I bet almost everyone has thought about while fiddling with an old radio dial. What's the real difference between AM and FM? And why do they sound so different from each other? Okay, here's a fantastic way to think about it. Imagine you're sending a message with a light. With AM, you're encoding your message by changing the light's brightness. That's its amplitude. With FM, which is frequency modulation, you're changing its color. That's its frequency. Now think about natural interference like a lightning storm. A lightning strike creates this huge random spike in amplitude. It's like a sudden flash of bright white light. It completely washes out an AM signal's message. But that same flash doesn't really change the color of the light, does it? And that's exactly why FM is so much more resistant to that kind of noise. So this all leads to a really clear set of trade-offs. When it comes to quality, FM definitely wins, no question. It's just more resistant to noise. But AM has a secret weapon, range. Its lower frequencies can actually bounce off the Earth's ionosphere, which lets them travel hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, especially at night. FM signals, on the other hand, they travel in a straight line of sight. They get blocked by buildings, the curve of the Earth, you name it. And finally, AM circuits are way simpler and cheaper to build, which was a huge reason it became so popular in the early days. So AM might be the original, but you know what? Its story doesn't end there. That fundamental principle, encoding information by changing a wave's properties, is the very bedrock that our entire digital world is built on. The basic idea of AM was just the beginning. The real evolution, the true game changer, came with digital communication. Techniques like quadrature amplitude modulation, or QAM, are direct descendants of AM. QAM is incredibly clever. It modulates both the amplitude, the strength, and the phase, which is the precise timing of the wave. By changing both of these things at once, we can pack an unbelievable amount of digital data, ones and zeros, into a single signal. This is the technology that powers everything from your home Wi-Fi to your 4K TV. Which really leaves us with this final thought. The next time you're streaming a video or making a call on your smartphone, just remember that the ghost of that simple old AM signal is still in the machine. The fundamental idea of modulating a carrier wave to send a message across the void is more critical today than it's ever been. And that's all for this explainer.